okay on my YouTube channel, so I can.
Can you hear that?
Actually, I can now. Yeah. Alarm bag drums in the background. What an introduction! What a way to start.
Yeah, I said I should have put it closer and then put it to the window. Yeah, so there you go. That's one. I'm hoping they'll be finished within very shortly. Like, let me just see, make sure we're all live. Get the chat.
Yeah.
How do I?
When you say very shortly, do you mean minutes or do you mean centuries?
Yeah, that's a line my great my ancestors were saying. maybe the boats will stop coming very shortly. We'll all just get on.
Put away those bloody drums.
All right. Okay, you're live. That's good. Let me see. I'm live. Right, happy days. And then I suppose it's probably the right thing to do is open up TikTok. And then see if make sure that they're involved. Even though me and TikTok have a very turbulent relationship.
I know the feeling.
Right, profile.
Hello. Our first comment. Hello, F Nans JY 456.
Hi there. Everyone will start coming in very shortly. I'm going to see if can I swap this around. Adjust the size of this. Okay, that might be a better thing for the long.
Hello, Bo.
Hello, Clover. How are we doing? We're not really doing surnames tonight. I'll do it live. I owe everyone a live.
See you.
I owe everyone a live for surname histories because I couldn't do it last week or on Wednesday due to a family problem. There's a member of my family not very well, so I will do surnames later, but not tonight. Tonight, I believe we're talking about what was it? Identity in medieval Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So identity, and not a touchy subject at all. Not a risky subject.
And it's something that is so straightforward. Identity, it never changes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to give Philip 2 minutes to see if he comes. And if not, we'll just crack on and also give everyone a chance to sort of come in. Hope all is going well. All's going well. Yeah, all's going well on my end, as well as can be.
We're even having sun. It's even warm down here. It looks like summer may come for a week.
Yeah, it was lovely up here in Ulster too. We've had lovely weather today. I wouldn't say it was sun, but there was no warmth from the sun. It was basically a lamp today. It was a bright lamp. There was no heat that came from it, but it was very bright.
I was in Killarney in the morning. That was very warm. When I came back down here, it was a bit less warm.
Okay, let's see if I can move TikTok chat to across the way.
And Kerry got beaten by Donegal in Killarney today, and one of the Kerry players got sent off, and he happens to be my daughter's geography teacher.
Oh. I acknowledge you. I do acknowledge you. Hey, I'm Steve. I do acknowledge you. I know I've not acknowledged you before when you've popped in, but I see you now, loud and clear. Yes, thank you. I mean, even though you weren't so nice to me in the last stream because you called me out. Joking. Hope you're well, handsome man. Thank you very much. I hope you're having I hope to see you streaming again soon. It was a brilliant stream. So, and anyone that's into any Call of Duty stuff, streaming wise, check out Hey I'm Steve on TikTok and all social medias. He's
Hey, I'm what?
Hey I'm Steve. But I don't think you'd be interested in Call of Duty gaming.
Okay, no.
I don't think there's much overlap in our fan base, but if there is, he's got a wonderful community, and so it's great to be part of it. So right, so we are probably just going to have to crack on. I don't think Philip's gonna come on here today, so we'll just how do we well, I mean that question, worry, that question actually might be the man, the myth, the legend. Let's not let him in.
Is it not? Did you not get it on portrait? No. It's on both, literally.
It's on both. You remember, it's the update. Update. There you go. So that should make it a bit less in its way. I just said as well, we'd give you 5 minutes to see if you could make it, because of the storm, and here you are.
Yeah, it's funny enough. It's past by now, but yeah, it's funny enough. All right, but no, just slowly me getting up and getting the bits and bobs done around the house before jumping on.
Hi Joseph, how you doing? It's great to see you. Thanks for the rose. You don't have to send gifts, you should know that by now. But thank you very much. Worry, we will actually probably end up covering that in this chat. I don't want to jump ahead, but we will end up covering that, especially if we're talking about identities and stuff.
Okay. And hello, Trexon from northern Minnesota. Welcome on board.
I will say, if you want to, anyone on TikTok, feel free to come across to any of our YouTubes. Our channels are mentioned there on the screen. You'd probably find it easier to get your comment read there.
Hi, Kira. Nice to see you there. And hi, Risa Firecat. Okay, shall we dive into the question of identity then?
Finally,
that's some argument.
Anything new on the Bodkins? I've been out of the loop. I haven't specifically looked at them. I mean, I've got some new books that I'm reading that sort of cover that area of the world. So I imagine I'll come across something soon. But if I'm honest with you, I don't think there's going to be too much more about them. You're going to have to start throwing other family names at me. And finally, an interesting life, Natasha. I don't know about that, but it's a life,
I'd say it's a difficult life, to be honest with you. I'll turn on the chats over there. But typhoon, somebody asks me there. I thought it felt like a blasted typhoon last night, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you what the storm was, but Okinawa has mad storms over here. Where everything goes mad for a good bit. And then we had 2 lightning strikes very close to the house. It was kind of like, you know where it flashes and then it just literally is on top of you. And then we had 2 of them very close. And so, yeah, it was a funny one last night.
Sorry, I Love Coffee. I have a video on them if you want to scroll down to near the bottom. Austin, I'm not doing surnames tonight. We're doing identity in medieval Ireland tonight. Well, I was saying I owe everyone a chat about surnames, and I will keep, keep a look on the YouTube and the Facebook for updates. I'll do one very very soon because I owe you all one because I wasn't here on Wednesday. Yeah, so Philip, this was, I believe, something you wanted to sort of you from some stuff you've been looking at, reading about, and some online discussion. So if you want to sort of start the
Well,
start the discussion off.
I could waffle all day about this one, to be honest with you. And I think I remember because I have been using it actually, funny enough, on a few of my presentations lately. Is there was a moment when Dr. Owen O'Neill turned around. We were talking about the Fitzgeralds, wasn't it? For 200 years, 300 years they'd been in Ireland. And what was it, Dr. Sean Duffy? He often turns around and refers to them as Anglo-Irish. And I remember we were doing what was it called, a live stream, and Dr. O'Neill had got annoyed about something. I can't remember what it was, but he was
I
like,
never
"Jesus
get
Christ!
annoyed.
At what point can they just be bloody Irish?" And I thought to myself, it is true. Like, at what point can as academics are referring to them now as Anglo-Irish, and some people even get tick about that term because it's not an ethnic term, right? The reason why academics, use the term Anglo-Irish is because they go between the Irish world and the English world, because they're constantly going between whatever assemblies is happening in Ireland at the time, and then they're going over to the English court as well. So therefore, that's why academics refer to them as Anglo-Irish. They're going between the two worlds. Because a lot of other people, especially on YouTube and social media, don't really like the term Anglo-Irish because it doesn't show off their ethnic identity, which is true. Like, don't get me wrong, the Fitzgeralds could be used as an example of Anglo-Irish because of the fact that okay, granted, they do have many children that marry into the Gaelic world, but their main child always marries into the English court to keep that connection between the two. So they're not dragged into very strange wars between England or the various Gaelic to it. So they marry, from a diplomacy perspective. But granted, people have found examples of these old French houses in Ireland that have never married into English houses and have always kind of married between either old French houses or have married between the Gaelic world. And so people on social media do use the example of Hiberno-Norman when expressing these Norman families that just marry between either themselves and the Gaelic and don't marry to English houses. And that's why this conversation of, identity in the High Middle Ages and the late medieval period is an interesting conversation to have. And I think it's a conversation we should have. Granted, not from an academic standard. Like, I'm not being paid a fortune from Trinity right now to investigate this, so you're going to get a below average statement, to be honest with you, a very very complicated argument. But regardless, I think it's a very interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I'm going to quote a very reputable source on this. Shrek.
Well, I didn't see that one coming.
No,
That
you
goes to
didn't.
show the standards we have here,
Yes.
Not Trinity standards, but Shrek
Oh,
standards.
much higher
Go
than
on.
Trinity. If you remember, in the first part of the first Shrek film, himself and Donkey are off to get the dragon, and
Yeah.
he's trying to explain to Donkey what ogres are. And he says, ogres are like onions, layers. That's what identities are. The identity
Yeah.
is not something simple, it's something complex.
Yeah.
Because you have kind of meta identities, you have local identities, you have religious identities, and then everything's mixed up. What's his name? Marshall.
Yeah.
Marshall, sort of, he's English? No, but yes. but he could have played for Ireland. His sons definitely had Gaelic blood. Um, Someone mentioned the term Old English. I like the term Old English, but only really from the mid 16th century on. And even then, it's a bit complicated. I use it because it's handy, but the Old English in the 1550s, they would regard themselves as English or English Irish. It's very, very complicated. And then in England, when did the Normans become English? You could say, I think, the 13th or 14th century when they stopped speaking French and then speaking English. So there's nothing easy. How many of the Normans that came to Ireland were Norman? How much Welsh blood do they have? How much Flemish blood do they have? How many were Bretons? It's very, very, very complicated. And
Yeah, I
I
think.
I'm not hung up over the precise names. Norman, Anglo-Norman, Cambro-Norman. Sometimes it's the term Norman works, but you just have to. It's not all the Normans were Normans. Short. Sorry,
Yeah,
Michal.
I know. I'd look. I think when you said that the layers, onions, identity, whether it's your nationality today. If you ask any person, what makes you English or Irish, it can come from a multitude of things. Oh, it's my biology, my family. I've been here for 10,000 years. It's my ethnicity. It's my culture. It's my language. It's my blah blah blah. The list goes on. And then whenever you have sort of in politics today, when people are defining people into these categories, especially with the rise of certain political sort of ideologies towards things like ethnicity, race, cultures, um, I, I, each bracket, some people will include two or three of those things, and that will be enough to define who they are and what they are. And some people will say, "Oh no, try to set the parameters. You need all of them, or you only need one of them." And that exposes a blatant flaw in the idea of going back and looking at these people, and going, this person is English, this person is Anglo-Norman, because not only do you not get their perspective on it, and what they call themselves, for the vast majority of people, you also strip away the complex nature of the political side of things, especially in Ireland. Especially if someone was a big believer in the Milesian myth, and there's manuscripts sort of saying, you are of the Milesian group, you are our Milesian brothers, blah 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 blah. All these sort of propaganda pieces written, and charters written where they write to other people and they sort of say their epinous ancestors and stuff. They put these people into this bracket, and then that very same individual would change his genealogy to fit the fact that the rise of the Neil are suddenly happening on their doorstep. So they're like, no, we're not this group anymore. We're actually a son of Niall Nogalach, we're actually part of the Gael. We're actually part of. So it just exposes the pure fluidity of the concept right from the start, which is very problematic when you're trying to then put labels on things for people to understand in modern media.
Yeah, another example of that is France. Up until the late 18th century, the French tended to see themselves as descendants of the Franks. And then along came Romanticism, and they changed. They said, hold on, we're not Franks anymore. We're the descendant of Vercingetorix and the Gauls. And that huge statue of Vercingetorix was built. Is it in Gergovia? I can't remember where it was built. So the French, whose names, I think in German, Frankreich or something was the name of France. Then it became Francia and then France. And suddenly they became Gauls, even though the name means Frank.
Yeah.
The big founding king of France was Charlemagne,
Mm.
um, whose whose I think whose main seat was in. Um, I think I'm not sure whether the town is in Germany or France now because it has moved a bit. Um, so identity is very fluid. Queen Elizabeth claimed to be Queen of England, or Queen of France, as well as England.
Mm.
Um, the people in Calais, until it was taken, they regarded themselves as English until 1550, more or less, when it was lost. The people of
Mm.
Dunkirk would have regarded themselves as more Spanish than French. They only became French at the end of the 17th century.
Mm.
A large part of what's now France, like southwest France, southeast France, was part of the Kingdom of Savoy. The Kingdom of
Mm.
Savoy, the King of Savoy was became the first king of Italy. It's crazy. Any country in
Yeah.
Europe, identity is very, very, very complex.
Because I was even looking at Hungary. Hungary's ethnic background is a massive, massive argument. You would assume, given the name Hungary, oh well, they must be Hungry Huns are Hungry. No, no, no. The majority of them have ethnic identities going from so many different nomad groups that go into the Hungary area because there's tons and tons of waves that go inside there. So there's tons of backgrounds that they bring themselves to. And this is even during the medieval period where they will argue, well, we're this ethnic group, no, we're this ethnic group. So even Eastern Europe, massive, massive mess. And the reality is that most of those Eastern European countries, just like in the Western Europe, is made up of tons of ethnic groups. So trying to key down and find a ethnic group to try to identify with can be quite difficult. Even today, like the arguments people are having on what it is to be Irish is, very, very temperamental in Ireland right now.
Yeah.
So
The,
yeah,
the
go
idea
on.
the idea that each ethnic group was a nation and had to have its state, and that you could
Mm,
only really be an ethnic group had to be fulfilled through a state. That's a
mm,
19th century invention.
yeah.
The nation state is an invention. Most states in history have been composite states.
Mm,
Spain, you had Aragon, you had Castile, Galicia, Granada earlier, Navarre, state, you have all these former small states get swallowed. England,
mm,
when does England become England? You
mm,
have, Wessex, you have the other ones. Scotland seems to become Scotland earlier than most. Ireland, because it's an island, had a traditional Irish identity going back. It was culturally unified, but politically divided.
mm.
I have to
Yeah.
run 2 minutes to get my plug. My battery's running low.
Okay.
Yeah, take your
Well,
time on that one.
yeah, I'll not go into the. Someone just asked there. Is Dwayne Fitzsimmons a mutual of mine on TikTok? Is he Cambro, Hiberno, Anglo, or just mixed Norman? He's Northern Irish. I mean, that's the thing. That's when we project backwards onto, and we try to attach ourselves to these ancient groups, these labels. I have individuals telling me that they're Anglo-Saxons. I have individuals telling me, and then you try to explain to these people that these aren't a homogenous group of people.
Mm,
We have burials in Scotland of people who are of the Campbells are a great example. Actually, the Campbell is a Gaelic name. They are a Highland family. They are very integrated into the Highlands, Gaelic, and then eventually Gaelic in the 14th century political system. They're very involved in it, backwards and forwards with the McDonald's, taking part as Gallowglass Rangers and so on. They then they so from a lens of looking at this family, you would think the Campbells are a Gaelic family. but actually genetically they seem to come from a Brythonic group in Scotland. I can't remember if it's the groups from Alt Clut or Picts or another sort of Brythonic group in the area. But anyway, they are older. They are from an older line that's outside of. They're not originally from a Gaelic family. So, and then they become very integrated into the Scottish system. As the Scottish court starts to form in Scotland and starts to sort of have this sort of Scottish identity, and then they become British. And if you ping every Campbell going back to their O'Dunia roots and say, what are you? Just pick a block every couple hundred years. They'd all give you a different answer. They would all tell you. And this is someone saying to me it's about your bloodline. It's on TikTok. But I'm just proving to you it's not about your bloodline, because none of these individuals are saying that their bloodline is the same thing the whole way through their history. Nobody has sort of said that that I'm the same thing the whole way through. And that is, another fundamental flaw in the argument about saying it's about your bloodline. Never mind the fact that literally you're related to everyone in Europe, if you're European, because of how, inbred we are.
The Erin language is a peak Celtic language. Fat controller, where are you getting this information from? Do you know that the word re-Erin pops up in the Annals of Ulster in 846, where Mael Shocknell I refers to himself as King of all of Ireland? Erin just means Ireland. So, like, where's this separate Irish people to Gael comes from? Because I remember you were saying something about that before, and I think it's down to the fact that you haven't learned Irish. I think you should go and learn Irish. That would probably be a good start.
Welcome
Because
no, I was just going to say, but welcome in.
it's it. I'm looking at the way he's using the linguistic words, and like, don't get me wrong, my Irish is terrible. So to Dr. Owen O'Neill, his usage of the linguistic language must be absolutely diabolical to your eyeballs, because like my Irish is terrible, and to me it's just like burning my eyes. Never mind your eyes. Because it means Irish. Like, you're saying the Irish were the people who gave their name to Ireland. But then you're separating the word Gael, and it's like, but
Because,
go on.
in terms, people are talking about genetics. In terms of genetics, the last big change in genetics in the island of Ireland was at the beginning of the Bronze Age. And for 1,000 or 1,500 years, we have no idea what these people called themselves.
Yeah.
The Irish, many people now say they were the Bell Beaker people. I'm really sure that these people say, yeah, we're the Bell Beakers. That's a great name. They probably had different names for themselves. Somehow or other, a unified culture emerged out of this in one that was politically divided. And the Irish language emerged. There wasn't various groups coming in. If people came in, it was in small numbers. The last massive genetic change was, I think, 3000 BC. I could be wrong on that date, but it was the Iron Age. Someone just said something about political identity versus ethnic identity. What is the difference in reality? The two are so intermixed. Sort of, if you look through the annals, you'll see all the Irish kings, many of them would marry foreigners. I think Niall Nine Hostages, did he marry, was his mother Saxon? There's a
Supposedly.
Yeah, there's a story, all right, that his what was it called? His mother was supposedly Saxon, but some of his wives are supposedly Saxon as well, because he was kidnapping left, right, and center, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's a funny one, because you see a lot of these radical groups right now, and they're all like, "Oh, I'm a pure." I saw somebody on, what was it, RT News, and he was like, "Us Gael or a proud stock of clean ethnic group. And I was thinking to myself, that's so the opposite to how people behaved during the medieval period, because both the Vikings and the Gael, anytime they would get a hold of a foreign woman and subjugated her, they would absolutely decorate her and use her as a kind of like, I have the biggest sausage, look how foreign my wife is. You know, it's something to be insanely proud of during the medieval period, is having a foreign wife. So I find it funny when you've got these very radical right groups who are mouthing off about having a local woman, and it's like, well, that's really a very low status thing to do in the early medieval period, is having a local wife. Having a local wife is like, you know, I just have a local wife.
Like
But having a go on.
there's someone arguing there that ethnicity is partly hard genetics.
Mm,
I tend to disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Take Shane O'Neill.
yeah.
His grandmother was a sister of the Earl of Kildare, and I think he has a great grandmother as well from that. And I don't know his family tree well, but I'm sure there is quite a few non-Gaelic in there. Um, what is ethnicity? You know, sometimes you can tell because of skin color and stuff like that. Like, how ethnically different are the English from the Irish? People are talking about genetics. What is the difference in genetics?
That's a very
There'll
interesting
be a
one to
lot of
ask.
common stuff. Someone says you're either a Gael or not by actual ancestry.
Yeah.
Go to any Irish person; they have some English ancestry. They probably have some Scots, some Welsh, etc. Going
Yeah.
back, most Irish people will have come originally, I think it's the Yamanaya people from the steppes. It's and culture plays a huge importance. Like, you take someone like the fifth Earl of Thomond, Donogh O'Brien, descendant of Brian Boru. However, as a kid, he's sent off to London. He's raised as a Catholic and plays a huge role in destroying Gaelic Ireland and bringing in a new English culture, and he's Protestant. To me, that shows how culture is more important than genetics in a way.
Yeah, that's going to be a very, very interesting one, because I was going to bring that up actually, because recent DNA to the English people have shown that English people in England today, still with every single different groups that have come into England doing DNA testing, actually still have 75% what was it, quote unquote, Celtic DNA. So it's interesting that they were expecting the majority of the English people today to be the majority kind of German, Saxon DNA. And yet it's 65% quote unquote native Celtic DNA allegedly is in them, which I find very interesting. And I do wonder, right now, they define themselves as culturally Saxon. I was listening to what this report said, and it says, well, culturally, we're still like Saxon. That's our background. We speak the English language that descended from the Saxon language. Our culture comes down, the local government system in England comes down from the Saxons. So culturally, we still define ourselves as Anglo-Saxons. Which, I do find very interesting. But as you said there early on, just mysteriously in the 19th century, the French just defined themselves as Celtic people. And I do wonder if the British in the next 50 years will just suddenly start defining themselves not as Anglo-Saxon, but as Celtic people, and just completely flip their history around.
Well, the problem with that is actually that's a very blanket term. That 75% would be it. Actually, England is very divided in its north and south ancestry. And actually, in the in the paternal line of paternal, the Y chromosome, paternal ancestors, it's a very small. I think it's not very small. It's like 20%. English people have paternal lines to Bronze Age settlers. It's only at 20%. Across the island. Actually, the Celtic DNA again. That's multiple studies have coming out with different numbers. So you have up to 50% being Germanic, Dane, Anglo-Saxon migration. You have the highest one I remember is about like 45% being Iron Age France connections, and then there's up to like 60% of like late Romano Celtic British. 60% is the actual number that you were quoting of Iron Age British Celtic population. So these are all coming from different studies, different So the problem is when you're not looking at them as like one country, you're going, oh, England, but actually if you break England down, and we all know like Danelaw, that came from the north down. The Saxon invasion, or well, so not really an invasion, but the Saxon migration came from the south and east up, and out. So if you're one of these individuals who are maybe in like Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, like Derbyshire, sorry, like in the center of England, where you are literally at the front lines of all these migration groups, your DNA is not going to be obviously representative of the same as someone who's from Cornwall or from Cumbria. And again, obviously, but yeah, I believe it depends on the studies. I know there were 2 studies done this year. I can't remember their names. That really kind of looked into it. I will find links and post them up. That really kind of went down into it. I haven't read it yet, but I know that they were heavily criticizing. There used to be a rumor going around that actually the English were only 5% Anglo-Saxon, which I thought was a ridiculous number, even even if from a conservative viewpoint. But
Yeah.
So again, but that's another problem with doing genetics and sort of highlighting percentages of because these percentages change as we get more and more data. And I don't know if anyone uses ancestry.com, but almost every like 3 to 6 months you get an update and your numbers change. Now that's autosomal testing, so it's something different. But your your numbers change on what percentage you are of Irish, Scottish, English, Welsh. People put too much emphasis on these percentages.
Yeah. And just to butt in there, AAA
No,
is asking a lot about ethnicity, etc. I'm not going to define it because I'm not sure what it is. Nobody is sure what it is. You can have if you want to be really logical about ethnicity, you break it down into whatever those groups of DNA groups are called, which is ridiculous. Ethnicity is much less important than culture. If you look at the book Foris Fassa, it was written by an Old English priest, and it was basically an attempt to show how Irish culture was a series of immigrations and the absorption of the Vikings, the absorption of the Normans and later settlers, but they're all Irish. Dennis asked about this. They're all Irish because they were Catholic. It doesn't matter to them about these DNA subgroups. I can't remember what they're called. Ethnicity as such is not a very useful concept because nowadays with DNA, it gets broken down into meaningless little subgroups. Political identity, cultural identity, religious identity are what matter. From the 19th century on, racial stuff invented and brought in. Ethnicity itself, what is it?
Mm. It's interesting, all right. And AAA there is saying that Celtic is not a DNA. Yeah, that is definitely applied over in Ireland and stuff. The problem is that England is they don't want to define themselves as being Welsh. During the actual Iron Age, the Welsh and the English were the same people. Okay, they were considered the Brittonic people. But these days, they do not want to define themselves as being the Welsh people. So they're not going to use the same terms because they don't want to, upset anything politically. So when people are writing this stuff, and this is what I'm reading, is that they will use the word Celtic. Okay, I know it's a much more broader term and it's a cultural term, not an ethnic term. But the reason why I spit it back out again is because that's what English academics are using, because it's safer than using the same terms the Welsh are using, because it causes an argument between English and Welsh people. So they use the word Celtic instead of Brittonic. But then it depends on what conversation you're having, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What was it
But
called? Go on.
if you look at English, what is
Mm,
English?
yeah.
English means being not French, and
Mm,
to a lesser extent, being not Welsh, being not Scottish, being not Irish.
yeah.
English was really, an idea, grew in opposition to France. Linda
Mm,
Colley has a very interesting book about this. She looks at the 17th and especially the 18th century, where the,
mm,
English and the idea of British grew. And that meant
mm,
not being French. To an extent, every national group is that. The Germans, kind of not French, not whoever else they didn't like at the state at that time, I can't think. And then the
mm,
Germans in the 19th century, the Austrians want to become the top Germans. Bismarck pulls a fast one, and the
mm,
Germans become Germans, and the Austrians are no longer German.
mm,
Whereas until like 1860 or 1850 something, the
mm.
Austrians thought they were the leaders of the Germans,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
suddenly they're no longer Germans.
Mm,
Um, Nationality and identity is a big mix, and if you go back, say, to the 12th century when the Normans came in,
mm,
what was the basis of European identity? Religion.
mm. Yeah.
Was being a Christian. If you were a Christian, you were a European, you were civilized, you were
Mm,
entitled to certain rights. Um, in the Reformation, that splits. And
mm,
that's why the wars of religion are so bloody, why so many people were killed or executed, because they were fighting over a definition of identity. And people who
mm,
split away, people who refused to partake in the official religion, were
mm.
questioning the very identity of the state.
Yeah. Interesting, all right.
Yeah,
Go
someone's
on.
saying that yeah, your genetics dictate your ethnicity. No, genetics do
Is
not
that
dictate
AAA, is it?
ethnicity. Yeah, it's just that's what the yeah, he said genes don't carry like ethnic or linguistic
Yeah.
labels.
Like, I
So
don't mean
you know,
to say this in a, what was it called? What was it? Oh God, my brain is still turning on. It's 5 in the morning here in Okinawa. So my brain is still turning on like a car engine. I'm looking for the right terms now, but I don't want to sound like a jerk or anything. But I'm just wondering if AAA has Asperger syndrome or something like that. And I don't mean it in a derogatory term or anything. I'm just curious because there's a lot of stuff that we're saying that AAA is grabbing and just running off with. And I don't mind having a conversation with AAA. You seem like a really nice person, but you need to calm down and relax and just listen to what we're saying and then digest the information, because you're getting very hyper with the tiny bits of information that we're giving you. Just relax and calm down for a second and just think about what we're saying. Especially myself, please be patient with me because it's 5 in the morning here. I've just got rolled out of bed, and you're asking information. I'm providing you the information, and then you're running 10,000 miles an hour, quite literally. Like, I'm looking at the comments here, and you're not allowing the information to sit into your head and just to digest it in. And like, think about it for a second. If the English are identifying themselves as Celtic and not Britannic because they don't want to upset Welsh people, they're not thinking in these very complicated terms. They're just trying to keep people happy. So they're just using it.
But
Go on.
he does raise a good
Mm,
point. He does raise a
yeah,
very
yeah.
good point that ethnicity is entirely different, actually, to
Mm,
Europe. In the sense, because you Americans are able to project backwards their cultural
mm,
identity onto history because it's such a new
mm,
nation. But the thing is, so when the problem I always tell people whenever they say about Americans don't know history, they do know history. That you give them dates, kings, locations, tribes. They're if they're into the Scottish and Irish history, into their history, boom, they know
mm,
them. Sometimes they conflate like mythology for fact, but that's even our locals do that, so it's fine. The problem is they don't understand how they don't use history the same way we do. They don't understand how it works the same way we do. Once you get past the formation of the United States, and the fact that you can project backwards in because up to a point of American history, because their history is
mm,
defined by ethnicity, race, culture, and their whole culture now, even their political culture, is so defined by
mm,
this. Um, but the thing is, then sometimes they can use that mythology and think it applies in Europe, and it doesn't. Once you get off the boat of the Maryland boat, and your family left from Boston, Lincolnshire, or the Pilgrims, you're you can't apply this, you can't project backwards
mm,
anymore. Because it doesn't work the same way. So I have no problem with someone saying that they are English
mm,
American, Irish American. I have no problem with that, because using modern labels in a modern time, in a modern concept, to describe. But for an American to try and then project further back and say that they are, and I have a problem with Europeans doing this too, that they are associated with
mm,
Anglo-Saxon, Norman, Gael, Pictish, you know. Uh, um, I have a problem with that, and I think most modern historians and most academics and most people would have a problem with that, because it doesn't work. You can't project back that far back. For what am I? I have an English mother. I have an Irish father. I was born here. I spent I left here when I was 10,
mm,
11. I spent the 20 years over in England. I would say I spent my formative years, 11 to 16, in England. So am I English?
mm,
Am I British? I don't speak Esquelga. I speak enough. I can order a pretty good
mm,
coffee, but that's about the height of it. So it's a ridiculous notion in my mind to sort of say to people, but I consider myself Irish. I hold a British passport. I know, and that's nationality. But you just see the problem with it. And then you go, well, what culture are we? Because if anything, we're Western European, North American culture. We all wear jeans. We all wear similar clothing. We're all speaking English, even as a second language. It's the political language. It's the trade language. We're sort of homogenizing in this northern block of culture, and we're holding on to these snippets. So are we suddenly becoming something else? Yes, we are, because obviously cultures, nationalities, ethnicities, well, they all change with each coming
Yeah.
generation. So yeah, but when people put the flag up and say, and the nail in the ground, and go, this is you can't do
mm,
that. That doesn't work.
Um, if you move away from the English language, if
mm.
you go to Spain or Portugal, and also to Latin America, South America,
Yeah.
in Portuguese and Spanish, there's two words for black:
Mm,
preto and negro.
mm,
They both only translate as black, but they mean different things at different times.
mm,
Um, in colonial Latin America, especially colonial Brazil, there was a difference between black people born in Brazil and black
mm,
people born in Africa, and that they were regarded as two separate ethnicities.
mm,
In the Brazilian census, they don't want to people. They have a problem. They want to find out what color are people, so they ask
mm,
ethnicity. Loads of people say they're white, but if they went to the United States, because in the United States law, in many states until the 1960s, they had the one drop rule. One drop makes you black. The General Colin Powell was called black in the States. In Brazil, he was basically white. There are a huge number of categories in Brazil, mixture of Indian with black, Indian with white. Like it becomes very, very complex. Yes, there are ethnicities, but what are they? You can say, "Oh, I'm Irish," but what is the Irish ethnicity? It's a it's a mixture of subgroups of DNA, but that means nothing. You take an Irish person and dump them in China where they're raised in Chinese, from zero. Are they, are they, they come out, they'll come out a different person.
For sure. What was it called? Michael brought up a very interesting
Oh,
point. Not Mihal there, but Michael in my chat. He was asking, what is the ethnic group of what was it called? Silken Thomas. Wasn't he Italian? And I remember myself and Dr. O'Neill laughing about this a few months back, because you're right, actually. It's in the book. Do I actually have the book on? Oh, yeah, there is. The Geraldines in medieval Ireland, where we're looking at who was it? It was James the Usurper Fitzgerald, identified himself as a Florentine, a part of the Geraldines, although, what was it called? Rachel will give out to me for my pronunciation. But regardless, you're right, actually. If you have somebody who, technically speaking, DNA isn't of Italian, and then suddenly one day they just decide by their own word that they are Italian, what do you do then? Do you know? I always find that's a very interesting one as well when defining themselves. And then on top of that as well, I could just imagine in the Irish Parliament going over to Kilkenny Castle or wherever they held Parliament that year, the Fitzgeralds rocking up and dressed all in their fine Italian clothing and just deciding, oh, well, we're Italian today. We've always been Italian, actually. We just kind of showed up at the Battle of Hastings in our Italian clothing and decided we're going to be a part of all this. So yeah, it is actually quite funny that we do, although we're calling them the all Normans and stuff, the Fitzgeralds in the late medieval period did declare that they were Italian, that they were from Florentine. So the whole backgrounds of a lot of these characters is quite funny, like, and
Just,
humorous.
sorry, just to reply to Seamus, he says Brazil is
Mm,
bonkers and not much point using their definitions. Every country is bonkers.
mm,
And a country that attempts to actually categorize the huge mix of colors and ethnicities and cultures, that's it is worth looking at their definition. It's a much truer definition than the 1% rule.
mm.
And I want to ask, AAA is throwing in zillions of comments. I can't read them all.
Yeah, I know.
but
I
there is
was actually
there
the
is
same
one.
as well.
What do
That's
you
why I'm
one
wondering
regard,
if he's
comment
got
that's
Asperger's syndrome. Go on.
what do you regard ethnicity as?
Mm,
And what use is it in terms of identity? Identity
mm,
is ethnicity is very, very a small part of identity. Identity
mm,
draws on culture, it draws on how you're raised, it draws on religion, it draws on politics. Like
But
your king dies, and all of a sudden another king from another country comes in, or there's a war, and you're moved
mm,
from Italy to France. You become
mm.
French, and that has happened.
yeah, I mean, I want to. He raised this. I don't know if he said he was also Scots or he had connections to it, and he says he's American. So that this actually raises something that I kind of flag and have a bit of a twitch in my eye about. But I am well aware that this is something that, again, because we've already sort of defined the parameters that they are fluid, they don't work the same way. But I have a problem with Americans saying that they are Ulster Scots,
Mm,
because the Ulster Scots they're referring to is that they are now I can break this down a bit better, but Ulster Scots, obviously the Scots and Lowland Scots and the Northern English come across to the plantations in the 17th century. Most of those people who then would move on to the Americas were only there for about 3 generations tops, and a lot of them did not intermarry into the native Irish population. So a lot of them just married within local farming families, because why would you? Because you have all the land, you want to marry within landing holding families, wealthy families, keep wealth within the families. You don't want to marry into a caste system, people that are in a lower caste than you, that don't have the same rights as you, etc. So most of them didn't marry, and then they moved on to the Americas. So what is their connection to Ulster except for they stopped there and lived there for a couple of generations? So to claim that connection, I would say you are related to the modern Ulster Scots, who are the families that continue to live here, intermarried with the natives, now live here, have lived here 400 years. Anyone that's saying I am a Scots related to the Ulster Scots. The only people from the Americas that I would sort of have a looser sort of acceptance of are people that are maybe related to the MacDonalds or the Glens and the families that came across with them in Antrim, because they'd lived here for a couple of hundred years before. They were well involved in the Gaelic framework of the North Channel, the interconnections between the MacDonalds and Ulster. So again, I have a pretty well-defined argument. That wasn't the argument for you, but I'm just saying as to why I can defend these positions that I propose here. But again, then if I'm telling someone that they are not something, when they feel that they are because they have all these links here, they have all these sort of, then who am I to sort of say that they aren't? Because ethnicity really is, it's situational, it's adaptable, it's fluid. It's a choice in most parts. Sometimes it's a choice foisted on you by others. Apparently I'm British. Because I live in modern day Northern Ireland. So it's just and these people are trying to draw these hard lines into this. I obviously don't understand how problematic it is.
So yeah, I like history. History is quite nice. We don't specialize in DNA, but we like to talk about various events and it's interesting, all right, because you do have people that try to define themselves with a background, but I think from the Fitzgeralds themselves, for example, what way they would have defined themselves is quite interesting. One day they're defining themselves as Italian, the next day they're defining themselves as Old English. It definitely is a very, very complicated conversation to have, especially when a lot of the time it just seems to be pointing to what their end goal is. Like if they're defining themselves as Italian, why are they doing that? Well, for example, James the Usurper, Desmond Fitzgerald, in around 1403, his end goal is to cut himself, perhaps maybe get more away from the English, because they're not doing very well at the time during the 100 Years' War. He sees, a chance to start getting more independence away from the English court, and then try to connect himself more from.
Sorry, Philip. Just really quick. Sorry, Philip.
To his own connections.
I wasn't speaking about you specifically. I was speaking about generic groups of individuals. So it's not an attack on you as an individual. So just calm. Yeah. It's not that wasn't pointed at you. It was just talking about Ulster Scots. So, right, carry on. Sorry, Philip.
Well, my ultimate goal, what I'm trying to say here, is that it appears to me that Micheál will easily find examples of this from the kings of Ireland during the early medieval period. But it seems to me, during the medieval period itself, the most important thing is politics rather than how they feel. So most of you guys in the comment section, especially AAA, is using a lot of feelings. And I don't think that's how they're pushing their agendas. I think the majority of their agendas is actually political, not their feelings inside. It's not a case of, I feel Anglo-Saxon. I think it's whatever politically, because James the Usurper Fitzgerald, for example, in the 15th century, in 1403, he's trying to get those connections with Florentine. So, in my opinion, using the facts that he's trying to get that trade link in, I don't think he's trying to say, oh, well, I feel Italian today. I think it's, well, I have connections to Italy, which will improve my trade network. I think that's his agenda that he's trying to push. And I think if you look at the majority of the times when they're trying to talk about their own backgrounds, they're trying to push a political agenda. That's my opinion
I
on
just
it.
want to jump in there. AAA, he defines ethnicity. An ethnic group or ethnicity is a community of people who identify with one another based on shared culture. Cultural, it doesn't fully end. So therefore, the Franciscans are an ethnicity. You get a whole pile of Franciscan monks, they're living in a monastery. They're an ethnicity. The same for the Jesuits. The same for the Mormons. You know, try and define it. To define it, you have to go and study anthropology and sociology, and you'll find that everybody fights over it. It's a very complex thing. And then Seamus replied to me. I was replying to him. This relation to Brazil, a long-term trend that they've discovered in Brazil is what's called whitening. People coming from poorer, more colored, darker backgrounds have always believed they have to become white to become rich, to become socially accepted. So you have a huge amount of people who many people would regard as non-white, who themselves believe they're white. The dynamics of Brazil are very interesting. I lived there a long time and I studied there.
I can't really add on to this because it's going way over my field of expertise.
Your ethnicity has nothing to do with identifying, except for your ethnicity would have everything to do with how your ancestors identified. So, I mean, because like I say, we've already established the Campbell family, how they identified as each political group, part of each political framework and kingdom through the history of Scotland. To become what they are today, and again, this is the problem we're constantly exposing here, is that that it is fluid, it is situational, it's adaptable. You can't just sort of project backwards into these sort of ethonyms and these exonyms applied by people of groups and sort of say that is me. Especially when a lot of these groups are not homogenous. The Picts weren't homogenous. The Gaels probably were a bit more homogenous than a lot of other early medieval groups, only in the fact that they are isolated on an island, not really part of the Roman imperial sort of system. And even then, the Romans helped unify a lot of groups. The Britons only really became sort of unified in some sort of concept because of the Romans. And again, the Irish sort of had the same thing with the Vikings. But you normally find the groups sort of homogenize and group together and find, assimilate when there's an outside threat.
Just jumping on the Romans. If you look at Roman history, you'll go crazy trying to think about identity, because Rome. What language did the Romans speak? Latin. But if you go back to early Rome, you'll find the Romans fighting the Latins. Rome initially was a city, which then expands. And gradually over time in the empire, Roman citizenship was extended. Towards, I don't know the exact date, but the 1st or 2nd century AD, everybody in the empire becomes a Roman citizen. Look at the list of emperors. Look where they came from. Some came from Africa, some came from Spain, what's now Spain. Sort of, they came from all over, but they identified as Roman. Sort of, it's very interesting. Someone was asking how fluent, how good is my Portuguese? I'm fluent. I have an Irish accent, so they find it funny. I translate Portuguese into English, academic. articles mainly and that's my main day job.
What are the Portuguese like talking when you have a different accent? Because I know, all right, in Japan, if your accent is different, people find it very difficult to understand what you're saying, especially regional. As a foreigner, if you pick up an accent from one area and you try communicating to someone from a different area, the Japanese do find it very, very difficult to be able to understand what you're trying to say. So it can be of your benefit to try to pick up the accent of that area when
Oh,
trying to
okay.
communicate.
When you mentioned Portuguese, well, I speak Brazilian Portuguese. So my
Mm,
wife is Portuguese, but like we lived in Brazil, and so when I go to Portugal, I blow their minds because I'm a gringo
okay.
speaking Brazilian
Okay.
Portuguese. So they do go into a melt because I don't fit into the usual categories.
Yeah,
Um,
that must be wild, all right. But can they understand what you're
Yeah,
saying? Is what
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying. Like, well, that's awesome. Actually,
um,
it's quite interesting.
yeah, sorry, factual, just sorry. You said the pigs are homogenous. They weren't no, not really till about the 7th century when the Kingdom of Fortru um, sort of gained political supremacy, over a lot of the smaller kingdoms in Scotland. So before
Mm,
that, the groups, but obviously the Picti are being recorded, in like 297 AD. But they're not a homogenous group before that. They are a grouping of
mm,
peoples all over Scotland, with just as many differences as similarities. But it's really the Pictish sort of um, political unification sort of happens in about the 7th century. Um, uh, Goddamn deconstructive. You can spit in a vial and they'll tell you exactly where your people come from. Yeah, and anyone who spits in a
mm.
vial will be told they come from everywhere. And
Yeah.
nobody goes, oh, he's 100% this. If
Wait, Mick Yankee, what have you done your DNA test? What's your DNA test say? Does it say that you're 100% Irish? Is it? Let me see. Seamus had a good one actually. Do ethnic groups historically identify elites LARPing as Italians or Turks or whatever is hardly the same. What do you mean by that one, Seamus? I suppose you're just talking about what we were saying about early on. Because I just find that fascinating how elites from time to time, depending on what their end agenda is, will literally change their background to fit whatever is going on at the time. Another example of that we were actually covering, actually, I will be covering on my presentation on what was it called? Sunday night for you guys, Monday morning for myself. Will be on the Scottish War of Independence. And that one's quite interesting because for a good chunk of the High Middle Ages, between the 12th century up to the 13th century, the Scottish in the lowlands had identified themselves as sort of Anglo Norman, Norman European. But then, once the Scottish War of Independence kicks off, halfway into it, around the time of the Battle of Banbrook, the Scottish, even in the lowlands, start to identify themselves more into the Gaelic world. And you even see letters from Robert the Bruce to Donald O'Neill talking about this Gaelic brotherhood between the two areas, which is a sudden change. It's a sudden 360 to how the lowlands were identifying themselves before the Scottish War of Independence. Because for a good chunk of that time, the lowlands had very much seen themselves as part of the Anglo Frank, the old French world. And then suddenly to do a 360 and start seeing themselves as part of that Gaelic world. But then, switching a gear again when you go into the Hundred Years' War, and they're switching their identities between their old French identity, their Norman identity, and then switching and jumping back into bed again with the Gaelic. And the Stuarts do that a lot throughout the medieval period and even going into the early modern period. And I'm surely, Dr. Owen O'Neill during the 9 Years' War has plenty of examples of the Stuarts switching their
Yeah, I was
identity
I was
between
going
European
to
and
I was going to
Irish.
give
Go on.
another example.
Yeah.
Walter Scott.
Aye.
Walter Scott and what he writes changed Scottish identity.
Mm.
So from around 1800 onwards, the Highlander, this fake Highlander with kilt and tartan, this becomes a fundamental part of Scottish identity until today, until now. Um,
Mm.
and shortly before Scott, you had what was his name? Was it Macpherson? O'Sheen, the fake poems. Um, what Scott did was create a fake Highlander, which became a very taken up by the British royal family, and now you have all these people who believe that the tartans are real. And I see people saying, "Oh, the Irish have to have tartans." I saw photos on the internet of the parade of clans or something, and there's someone walking along wearing a kilt and some stuff, all 20th century inventions. Just this form of identity, cultural identity, is constantly remade.
Oh, it really is like what was it, 10, 20 years ago, sorry, about 40 years ago, we identified ourselves as the proud Celtic people, and then a whole load of DNA tests came out and we weren't as connected to mainland Europe as we thought we were around 300 BC. That there is immigration before then, around the Bronze Age, from the continent in Europe, mostly from northern Spain over to Ireland. But in 300 BC, there doesn't seem to be a large immigration from Gaul to Ireland. So now you've got a lot of academics who are very hesitant into using the word Celtic. And you see people mostly using the word Gaelic these days. So, like Gaelic, what was it called? Cultural identity is always changing. Is definitely the truth. Like, because I remember being in the 90s, and Celtic was used like there was no tomorrow. Celtic, Celtic, you're Celtic, I'm Celtic. We're in a Celtic golden age now. You know, so, and then suddenly we do a whole load of DNA testing. We do a whole load of archaeological research between Ireland and Gaul, and suddenly we're not as Celtic as we think we are. And even the word Celtic, where does the word originate from?
Yeah,
It's a
like
word used by the Romans. Go on.
Celtic, yeah, used by the Romans, then disappeared, then reinvented
Mm,
at the end of the 16th century. When it was
yeah,
reinvented, it specifically excluded the Irish. The
yeah,
Irish only really become Celtic in the 19th century. Um,
mm,
and nowadays, um, Celtic in a way means non-English because they talk about the Celtic fringe, Scotland, Wales,
mm,
Ireland, i.e.,
mm,
non-English. Celtic music seems to mean music that has common roots in Ireland and Scotland. Wales falls out of
mm,
it. Sometimes Breton comes in. It becomes a very big word. Um,
mm,
Someone asked about kilts. No, kilts are a fairly modern invention. Um,
mm,
there were clothes like them, but uh, Walter Scott and then the whatever you call people who make the material, weavers or something, they they suddenly realized they're onto a big thing and invent this register of clan tartans, etc. In Ireland at the end of the
mm,
19th century, there were attempts to do it, and you have that
yeah,
saffron kilt, which I think the Irish Army used for their pipers. But
yeah,
they're all fake.
yeah,
If you went to the Highlands in the 14th century, the fashion would have been
mm,
different from the fashion in the 13th century and the 15th century. And I'm sure you would have found
mm,
people wearing the latest fashion that they found in Edinburgh up in like the very north of Scotland.
mm.
So, wasn't
Go on.
something Gaelic societies where you would take on the culture and ways of your father, regardless of where you lived? No, and I'll highlight one very clear case of this is Maurice McCotter in 1290. He was the Lord of
Mm,
Fermoy Cotter. Basically, oh, I hear my alarms telling me to. I don't know why I've got an alarm at 22:15. Anyway,
mm,
he actually protests that him on behalf of him and like a couple of hundred of his kinsmen that they're being treated like native Irish. Um, and
mm,
despite he's paid like thousands of pounds to gain the rights of an Englishman, and he actually gains legal rights to being an Englishman, and that's Cotter.
mm,
I mean, I don't think you need much more than like the surname McCotter. Not only is it an Irish name, but it comes from a Norse name. Like it comes, so there's so many dynamics to that, and we could pick away at it another way. But so I think and that's not the only case of this. You've got a couple of the Cadigans have a case as well. The Arders have a case. Two other families that involve their rights to prove they're English and stuff like this. There's another couple of families. There's loads of these court cases all through the medieval era of like Irish families or families who've been living in Ireland for a very long time, having to prove they're Irish to remove any kind of stigma, prove they're English to remove any kind of stigma, even though they probably are Irish, you know.
mm.
So again, another.
Well, you see, that's what's hilarious about it, because in the 15th century, you see the same thing in Galway, where Galway, I was joking about this to Rachel as well, where Galway sees itself as proud, civilized English people looking outside the walls of Galway at the wild Irish outside. But as Dennis had said early on, it really, like, if you go back to the Roman identity, this whole thing of being civilized and uncivilized, sometimes, especially in the 15th century, the likes of Galway, for example, in their letters to the English keg, seem to use the word English not as a DNA term, not as an ethnic term, but as a civilized term. We're civilized English. So it may not always be used from an ethnic interpretation. It may sometimes be a cultural civilized identity, that we're civilized members of the English society. So therefore, we deserve protection. You need to protect this civilization against this uncivilized society that's outside the walls, this uncivilized wild Irish. I think it was Dr. Diarmaid Scully brought up a very interesting argument a few years ago, and he was saying how, if you look at Gerald de Wales's work, The Topography of Ireland, I don't know what that banging is. What's going on there?
There's the 12th parades and stuff. They're all doing their wee
Oh,
parades.
Jesus Christ. Will you do me a favor? Put on the back of the car for there,
Oh
just,
yeah,
throw a few rocks at
where
them.
I am, that would not be a good idea. I am literally in Ulster.
Chuck her on,
I live in
just to move on, It's 2026. Come
I
on, lads,
literally live in Ulster Scots heartland. This is like the purest Ulster Scots community here, and that if I did that,
Just a few rocks.
if I
Just move them on. Go on.
I just want to actually really quickly, yeah. So if you what you can hear right behind me is a lambeg. They're all getting drunk and having their parades. Literally
Oh,
right
lovely.
outside my room. AA Triple A. You've just said here a very thing that really highlights something here. You says again, we're talking about right now. You're talking about right now. Where if you just want to go into our channels, we're all we all study and teach and are talking about medieval Ireland and parts of Britain and Europe. So we're not talking about right now. Yes, we make references to now, but we're not talking about right now. We're talking about identity, ethnicity, of medieval Ireland. So, so again, whatever you're trying to get at from the modern day perspective, we're just telling you about the medieval era and how they thought. And yet we're just sort of saying we may take reference to things happening now, but we're not really talking about right now. We don't care what ethnicity you want to be right now.
Well, this is why I think, like, I don't mean this in a derogatory term, AAA, but I'm just curious, like, do you have Asperger's syndrome? or something of the like, because you need to relax a wee bit, like listen to what we're saying, let it digest in your brain before you start running 1,000 miles an hour down the road. Because you seem to be picking up little tiny bits of what I'm saying, not putting it into the right context, and then running 10,000 miles down the road. Because I'm looking at, like, I'm saying stuff out of my mouth, but like you have to remember, I'm saying stuff from the point of view of Robert the Bruce or Silken Thomas, and we're trying to get their perspective, because that's my field of expertise is medieval history. It's not DNA. Like, like some of the stuff that you guys are talking about tonight, I have no clue about. I have no clue what you're talking about, because it's just not my, like, I don't specialize in that stuff. Like when people ask about like their DNA, my DNA is such and such a thing. I'm just like, oh, well, that's great. Like I like like Mihal has a thing on DNA and stuff, but it's just not my field of expertise. Talking about Robert,
I just
yeah, go
find
on.
it interesting that we can match up annal genealogies with DNA. Not all the time, obviously. I'm not saying we can. I'm just saying it's interesting when we can, because it's such a good. It's almost like validation of what was said in the past, especially when we know like how much of it is, pseudo history written in political propaganda. The context of it. And none of the medieval manuscripts on these two islands should be taken as fact, written in the medieval era.
Yeah.
There is always a narrative behind it, a context behind it, a spin behind it.
Yeah.
But whenever you see a bit of like a glimpse of truth in it, it's fascinating to me, which is why I'm interested in genetics. But there's people like Caveman on this channel who speaks up, would know far more about things like the actual SMPs and the breakdown of Y chromosomes and stuff. So yeah, and talking about Caveman, no, I won't be coming up to yours on 12th. I'm taking my kids away, but not to Donegal. Not to Donegal.
Okay. Dennis
Go on.
Dennis asked an interesting question. Any medieval Irish stories about infiltrators or spies who assumed different ethnic customs, someone who pretended to be of a clan or to be English to gain intelligence? There are stories of spies, etc., but I can't recall any like this. But reading Gaelic sources, there's loads of what will strike you is how fluid identity is. People are coming from one side to another. Like the pretty soon after the Normans, Anglo Normans, whatever you want to call them, arrive in Ireland, you can see they are immersed in Gaelic culture, um,
Yeah.
and the same with the Norse.
I could imagine, like, to be honest with you, and sorry for butting in there on, to Dennis, I could imagine that happening, or especially around Kilkenny, because we have, and Michal could probably expand on this one, the Fitzpatricks. What you have very early on is a siege up around Limerick, but there seems to be sharing of intelligence going on between the two sides. Now, obviously, they're not looking at themselves as like MI5 or MI6 or CIA. It seems to be just conversations that they're having in the pub that reveals intelligence on both sides. But there seems to be once the Normans, the Cambro Normans, the Knights of the Welsh Marches under Strongbow have captured Kilkenny, they seem to know a lot more than they should know. And a few academics have pointed that out. And it could be down to the fact of people kind of switching and playing around with their kind of ethnic identity, of being kind of, how I'm trying to say this is that they're kind of blurring the lines, because of the fact that the Cambro Normans have married into various Welsh families, start off with a kind of blur between the Welsh and the Irish. And then furthermore, once they go into Kilkenny and they start to marry into the local population in that area, and you have the siege of Limerick that's kind of on and off again at that time, there seems to be a lot of mixing going on. And then from there, a lot of spying between the two sides. So from around definitely 1220 onwards, you could see somebody suddenly going, well, I'm English today, and then spinning a whole load of information. And then tomorrow saying, oh, well, I'm Gael, gathering up information, or once again, spilling the information down to them. So I could, to be honest with you, I could see that happening, especially after 1220, and you have that blur between the Normans and the Welsh already there from 1169, and then furthermore more blurring going on between Kilkenny to Limerick, and then that spreading of information going on. So to be honest with you, I could see that happening.
Just in relation to that, you'll find a lot of blurring in the 16th century. There's a famous picture of an English captain. What's his name? He was executed because in London because he tried to single-handedly free Essex. But and I think he's responsible for killing Fiachú O'Byrne, and I can't remember his name. But he's supposedly dressed as an Irish kern. And
Oh, yeah,
you
I know
find
the one.
lots of English soldiers, lots of English settlers who, to an extent, go native. And then you have people like Spencer and other Calvinists, and they're like in the 1590s and 1580s, they're freaking out about English getting seduced by Gaelic culture. Spencer comes out with this mad thing. He says the old English have degenerated. They're no longer English because they've become Gaelic Irish, and he says it's because the old English, like the lords, they all have Gaelic wet nurses. So little baby Fitzgerald, little baby Butler are drinking milk from a Gaelic wet nurse. Therefore, they're becoming it's the milk that changes the person. So Gaelic culture, even though most English hated it, they were afraid of its attractive side, and it does seem to have been very attractive in some extent.
Sure wasn't. The painting is Marcus the Younger,
Yeah.
is the one that's dressed up as a kern, and
No,
he's not the
he's the
first
painter.
one.
He's the painter.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
trying
right.
to-
Is that what's going on? Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the captain.
I did a video on him.
Thomas Lee. You talking about Thomas
Yeah,
Lee?
Thomas Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a video on him years ago on your channel, Philip.
Yeah.
I didn't even clock.
That's
what
it,
you
Dennis.
were
Yeah,
talking
Tom Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Captain Lee. I did a whole video on him about 4 years ago, and I totally forgot. I just couldn't think of his name there. Is it still on your channel, or was that your old channel?
Probably the old one. But regardless, what was it last is saying on that one? You guys are moving too fast for my brain. Oh, yes, that was it. He wasn't the first one to do that as well. You're right. Roger Mortimer did that in, what was it called? I think it was 1397. 1397 is when Roger Mortimer did it as well and was killed. Just a skirmish. I think it was down in Leinster. He was killed going into a battle. I can't remember. I should bloody know the name of the battle at this stage because it's one of the most famous battles in Irish history. But regardless, he was I think he was drinking, right? And he comes out of the cell. Instead of staying within the castle walls, they go out to fight the O'Byrnes and the O'Tooles. And it was going to turn into a big battle. But what happened instead is that he jumped on his horse and went straight into the spear formation of the Kerns, and he ends up getting chopped up by the Kerns and his head cut off. And the Kerns didn't know who he was. The Kerns said afterwards, if they knew who he was, they wouldn't have chopped him up, allegedly. And what was it called? Because he was dressed as a Kern. He wasn't dressed as an English knight or anything. So yeah, he was getting drunk, and it's funny because at the time you had the statutes of Kilkenny, which forbade English knights as dressing up as Gaelic knights to prevent that sort of thing happening of them accidentally killing, the English accidentally killing another Englishman because he's dressed up as a Kern or Gallowglass or whatever. So it's kind of funny that Roger Mortimer would come over from England to Ireland, dress up as a Kern, and then ride into battle and get chopped up by other Kerns. It's kind of ironic, especially when the Statutes of Kilkenny had only just freshly come out from Lionel of Antwerp.
Yeah,
So
but it's
go
also
on.
I love pointing it out every time. That we sort of mentioned the statues of Kilkenny that tell these Englishmen to start being more English as it's actually written in Norman French. They couldn't even write it in English because they wouldn't have understood it. They had to write it in Norman French to tell these guys to stop being Irish. So they wrote a Norman French document to tell English guys living in Ireland to stop being Irish and be more English.
Yeah.
It's just
and 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 the and the fact that that law was needed shows that
yeah.
there was this um, transculturation, whatever you want to call it, was already occurring to a great extent. And if you go to any frontier area, any place where there's two groups interacting, you're going to find the same thing. You're going to find bits of the same culture, of
Yeah.
different cultures.
It's funny because the blurs that was we were saying there, the blur starts to kick in 1220, and it becomes a serious problem for the English, looking from the outside over in England in around the Scottish War of Independence, because you have the likes of the Bergs, who are a political problem, a political nightmare, because of the fact that although they're still very during the Scottish War of Independence, the Bergs still stay very loyal to the English crown. The English don't trust the Bergs during the Scottish War of Independence, because of the fact that the Bergs are married into the O'Briens, and they're married into the Scottish royal family. Both the Bruces and the Stuarts. So the Bergs are heavily married into the Scottish royal family at the time, which causes Edward the First to really question the Red Earl at the time. Very, very, very funny predicament. So when Lionel of Antwerp comes over to Ireland, he marries into the De Burgh family, and then he brings out the statues to Kilkenny because he doesn't trust what the academics are referring to as the Anglo-Irish. These people are blurring between both the Gaelic world and the English world at the time. And, many of these old French lords are married into the Gaelic, and these laws are meant to prevent them from continuing these marriage alliances between the Gaelic world, and try to pull them more back into the English world again, which is quite complicated, especially when and Dr. O'Neill could either completely go against this or completely agree with this. The way the king group system works in Ireland, of having those marriage alliances, the fosterage, and adoption as well, that it seems that many of these old French lords from 1220 onwards seem to blur themselves into, not quite fully 100% in with them, but kind of have this kind of foreign sense. Like, they're literally referred to not as English in the Annals of Ulster, but as Gaul, foreign. So it's a very funny predicament and funny interpretation that even the Gael have of these foreigners. That they're not quite English, but they're kind of blurring into our system.
I think one point there is, or 2 points. Um, First of all, identity is a mask in a way, and people are quite skilled at presenting themselves in certain ways in certain environments. So you have a De Burgh um, fighting alongside Gaelic soldiers in Ireland, but he'll dress and act in a certain way. But if he has to address the council in Dublin, or if he has to go to London and meet the king or the queen, he's going to be completely different. He knows how to be English in England, and he knows how to be whatever the term is, this dodgy, blurred English in Ireland. And the second point is, we've been talking about meta identities, but if you dive down, the Bergs would have had some sort of identity. Um, People from Ulster would have had an identity. People from Munster would have had an identity. People from Dublin, people from, there are lots and lots of smaller identities. The church, people in the church would have had identities, and like Franciscans in the early modern period, Franciscans and Jesuits did not get along.
Mm.
And sort of you can, and I presume if you someone was asking about was there whiskey, there was. Whiskey makers probably had their identity. Goldsmiths would have
Mm.
had their identity. It's not just this one big identity.
Yeah.
Mm.
Just quickly, Triple A. I never said that the Scotch Irish or the Scots never stayed. You've misinterpreted what I was saying there. But anyway, it's funny you were saying about the Burkes. Because I always have there's a statement made about them that in the 16th century they go to Dublin and they've got to basically profess their loyalty to the English government or the Parliament in
Mm.
Dublin and the English Crown, and then they go across. They dress in in English clothing. They go to the Dublin Parliament. They're like, "Yep, we're not Irishmen. We're Englishmen." Blah blah blah, and then they cross over the Shannon. And right in full view of the garrison in Athlone, they take off their English
Mm.
clothing and put on saffrons and are basically there just going like that on the other side, like because they'd done what they needed to do. So it was just funny how you get the Burkes when I always think of that example of them doing that, and that again, the fact that they are willing to, they're doing their legal obligation. They don't want to get in trouble. But the minute they
Mm.
get back into their Gaelic lands, and the minute they start acting the bollocks, like oh, excuse my French, sorry, they're there, they got the saffron, they're giving it big licks over the shaman, they're just getting on again like the locals, and you wonder
Mm.
which side is the game, that they're playing. Are they
Yeah.
playing the English Crown or are they playing the locals?
Oh, they're playing
Aye.
everybody. It's the Game of Thrones, isn't it? I wouldn't trust anyone. Like it is funny because in England there's this kind of trust thing between the nobles that are very close to the English crown, and I'm always looking at it going, well, they're just playing the long game. The Butlers, the Stuarts, these families, they're supposed to be close to the English title. I think ultimately that they're playing it from the long term, because if you take the Butlers, for example, who are supposed to be super loyal to the English crown, you can see that Seamus, the White Earl Butler, his period, he's very kind of disloyal to the English crown in many ways because of the fact that he puts what was it called, James, the usurper Fitzgerald, first for a good chunk of the time he's Lord Deputy of Ireland. And then suddenly going into the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, he suddenly switches, betrays James the usurper Fitzgerald, and then jumps in bed, not with the the Yorkists, but the Lancastrians. So I think it's all really Game of Thrones, because like the reason why I bring that up is because the Butlers in Ireland are meant to be seen as super loyal to the English, and yet from my perspective they just seem to be playing the Game of Thrones, which does them super well. They survived those years of the 100 Years' War, switching their skins all the time, and then going into the Tudor period pretending that they were always loyal to the English crown. Sure, look at our history. But if you actually get into the actual details of them, you see that they were just playing the Game of Thrones like everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Um.
Mm.
Oh. Hang on. Oh, they're talking about plantations and famines and stuff. I actually have a load of posts about this on Facebook. That
Mm.
that got some that got some people very angry, and I will say that the first two posts were maybe a little bit polemical, like they were a bit
Mm.
aggressive language. but I sort of evened them out towards the end. I came at it to attack myths about the plantations, such as Scottish famines and the reasons for the plantations. And I came at it to attack them, and I really used attacking language instead of just being a bit more nuanced with it. But anyway, I would go check them out if you're interested in the plantation. This isn't about the plantations today.
It's interesting as well, as Seamus is bringing up, the loyalty of the Stuarts can only go so far, because of the fact that, sorry, not the Stuarts, the Butlers, because they end up being very, very loyal to the Stuarts, and they kind of advertise themselves that they're, insanely loyal to the crown to the bitter end. It's complicated because they also have that kind of relationship with Kilkenny. Like the people of Kilkenny really looked after Kilkenny Castle, especially during the Irish War of Independence and stuff, because of the fact that the Butlers from the very beginning had always looked after the locals of Kilkenny. So the locals of Kilkenny have always had a positive thing to say about the Butlers. Even up to the William Knight and Jacobite Wars, the Butlers never sold out the people of Kilkenny. And because of the way that the William Knight and Jacobite Wars had kind of advertised the Butlers, they were seen as super loyal to the monarchy itself, even when the monarchy had been, from their perspective, usurped. But maybe they were just trying to, it's a funny one because you can see the same thing happening during the Cromwellian Wars as well, where the Butlers are in a very strong position for supporting the English crown at the time, once again, the Stuarts, during the War of the Three Kingdoms between Ireland, Scotland, and England. How the Butlers are perceived as being super loyal. But once again, is it the fact that they're super loyal, or is it the fact that if they don't support the English crown, they could be in a position of losing a huge power base inside of Ireland? Because at the time, the Stuarts are making sure that the Butlers are pretty much in many ways kings all but name inside of Ireland, as long as they keep that sort of loyalty to the English crown. And then after the William Knight and Jacobite Wars, because of the fact that they didn't support the winning side, afterwards they do lose a lot of power within the Stuarts, especially because at that point they were pretty much Dukes of Ireland. So it is a very, very complicated situation. Of course, up for different interpretations, especially with the William Knight and Jacobite Wars, because it's outside of my field of expertise. Is it the fact that the Stuarts are just super loyal, or is it the fact that they're only looking after their interests inside of Ireland?
I mean, the Williamite War. So you have this is not going into the whole nationalism. When you look at the Tudors, you're looking at sort of proto-nationalism. So then you have these mechanics and movements and these sort of groups trying to, homogenize the identity that they're forming around the structure that they're building upon, that eventually becomes sort of nationalism. And then so the Stuarts, so when they're coming in, you've got a king who's effectively a king of effectively Ireland and Scotland and England and Wales. And these are a mismatch of multiple cultural groups, multiple different peoples. And he's a guy that sort of, these are, King Charles, when he's writing to Bonnie Prince Charles, he's wrote him a manuscript basically saying to him, this is how you be a king. When you do finally get across to Great Britain and Ireland and you become a king, this is how you become a king. This is what you do. Here's the playbook. And he says that the Gaels, the clansmen in Scotland are the most loyal people. He says, but the fact that they're Gaelic is a problem. Their culture, they're great soldiers, they're great loyal, great loyal guys. It's just too bad that they're Gaels, and he says it needs eradicated. So that culture needs not the individuals, but the culture that exists there needs eradicated. So when you start getting into the sort of Williamites and the Williamite Wars and the Jacobite Wars and sort of all these sort of other things come to play that I really think aren't really in the same sort of area as the medieval era. Religion's such a big factor as well. You could be Irish, but if you're a Presbyterian, Presbyterians suffered some similar discrimination to the as Catholics. So if you were Anglican Irish, you wouldn't face the same stigmatism as as your kinsman who hadn't converted. So there were ways to move up the social ladder and to move around the dynamics, political dynamics, if you sort of took other routes. Again, we're talking about 1,000 years worth of history here, and it's always changing at every point.
I'm going to get a stick there and poke AAA for the crack. Because AAA says there, Caveman, Stuart is Gaelic. Are they?
No.
They kind of, during the medieval period, they really blurred themselves between the Gaelic world and the lowlands of the kind of Norman European world. However, don't get me wrong, when you're dealing with the 14th to 15th century, they do play the Gaelic card a good few times, especially with the O'Neills. Dr. Owen O'Neill could definitely expand on that when it comes down to the 9 Years' War. However, once you get out of the 9 Years' War, from my interpretation, once they take the English crown, they just go 100% more European perspective than a Gaelic perspective for sure, to justify themselves as civilized English members of society, because they're playing the political game inside of England at the time, once they take that English crown after the death of Queen Elizabeth.
Sorry, my internet has been going a bit.
Yeah, mine too.
I missed most of what you're saying. No, I think I tend to agree with you. I'm just going, because we're almost running out of time. Daniel Keown has asked an interesting question. What do you think it was about Gaelic culture that was so detestable? Was it the clan focus took allegiance away from the king? Think less about clan focus, because in essence, Gaelic Ireland, you go to England and you had loads and loads and loads of nobles. Basically, England began to centralize much earlier than Ireland, much earlier than Gaelic Ireland. England also had the War of the Roses, which wiped out loads and loads of nobles. It comes down to power, it comes down to difference, it comes down to what's called othering. They detested the Gaelic Irish because they were not English. They detested them even more because they stayed Catholic. And they detested kind of Ireland because Irish towns, Irish lords had more rights than in England. So it's not the clan thing, it's more a question of difference and being unable to bring them under their power. And it's the same in any country, any kingdom, empire. Those on the fringes tend to be detested because they are different, they are othered.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll start to finish up there. Obviously, if you guys have any more questions or anything else we'd like to expand on, we definitely want to do that there. I think there's an interesting one there. The origin of the word.
Aeronach, that's invented in Louvain in the 1620s. It's written by Irish clerics who fled Ireland. They're studying in Spanish territory, and they are trying to create a word that means Catholic Irish. The word Europeans looked at the Irish and had this idea of Irish before the Gaelic Irish did. The Gaelic Irish only created the word for Irish in the 17th century, after the destruction of the Gaelic system.
Mm. Uh,
But Gerald Will said the Irishman's greatest delight was to be exempt from toil. Yeah, he says we were sexually immoral. We had, like, we had basically everything wrong with us, really.
Werewolves. I think werewolves as well.
Oh yeah, we're werewolves.
mm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
All the
going
good
for it.
stuff.
I'm trying to go. Yeah, I can't find my razor, so I'm not tempting. Uh, you know. Yeah, but I mean, it's funny when you see these tropes that are thrown out about um the Irish by Gerald Comprencius, and then you look at the ones being thrown out today about others. I'm not going to name
Mm.
which ones because that's just too political. But yeah, it's funny how they resonate. That it's the
Mhm.
same tropes, it's the same things that are being thrown at them. We didn't build towns, we didn't build castles. It wasn't the fact that we didn't have the ability to. It's just that we didn't need to. And
Oh,
whoa,
well,
whoa, whoa, I'm not talking about castles specifically, like as in you're gonna.
no, no. When it comes down, the development is just
That's what I
different.
mean.
It's not an English development because if you look at it, we have the development of the monastic settlements between. Well, first and foremost, we still need to do more archaeological work into it. But between 410 up to 550, the word cashel that seems to have a linguistic connection to Bergs over in what was it called? Roman Britain at the time seems to have some kind of link over to Ireland. So the Irish are building cashels, perhaps in the style of the Romans. We just don't know. The Rock of Cashel definitely needs more archaeological work to be done there. To see what the story is of the development of settlements and forts between 410 up to 550. Then something very, very strange happens between 550 up to around 793, where we have the development of monastic settlements. Now, monastic settlements do stand in for the development of cities. So it's not the fact that we don't have cities, they're just developing so much more different than what we're seeing in our European counterpart. So we do have areas that are more, that are central to the community, which are monastic settlements, but everyone seems to be living outside of these monastic settlements that cannot be referred to as cities. Now, in the center of those monastic settlements is the church, and it seems to still be somewhat styled and have the interpretation of a Roman city. From there, then, after 793 up to 840, then we start to see the development of urban cities. Now, a lot of people come in and they automatically see the word Viking and they assume that it's the Vikings that bring cities into Ireland. That's complicated, as Professor Patrick Wallace will point out in his book on the study of Dublin, is that Dublin has in the middle of it Christchurch. When doing further investigation into Christchurch, we have wooden beams that indicate that Christchurch or some form of monastic settlement had developed before around what was it called, around 940 onwards, which seems to indicate the fact that this is more styled on an Irish monastic settlement rather than a city development that comes from Scandinavia. Now, it is mixed between the two. It's not a case of, this is 100% an Irish monastic settlement that's developed into a city. It's blurring between the development of city developments that are happening in Scandinavia, specifically Norway, and in the development in Ireland as well. But it was a Hiberno-Scandinavian settlement. So to turn around and say that it was a Viking city, that the Vikings had introduced cities into Ireland, isn't quite the case. It seems to be very, very complicated, and it's more of a Hiberno-Scandinavian settlement rather than just a Viking settlement that's developing in Ireland. But that's evolution and development. And then as we go into the Norman era, you can see more of the ideas of European settlements coming into Ireland. But that was already happening before the coming in of the Normans. You could see that by the Roman architecture that was the Romanesque architecture that was coming into Ireland before the arrival of the Normans. Dr. Owen O'Neill could easily support me on this one. And that is, what was it? Cormac's Chapel. Cormac's Chapel that you can see behind me is amazing example showing off that the Irish were developing and evolving all by themselves without Norman intervention. We cannot support it archaeological and hard evidence yet, but if you read the literature, it heavily indicates that the O'Connors were building moat and bailey castles in Ireland before the arrival of the Normans as well. And Ireland was already a part of the Crusades, and Ireland was already a part of the reforms of the church before the arrival of the Normans as well. However, when the Normans do come into Ireland, the development continues as we go from the old Romanesque style into the Gothic styles that were happening in Europe at the time. And things start to become very instant in Ireland. There isn't like a 10-year gap. There's very much an instant development in the 13th century when you have the likes of, what was it called, the Marshals, especially when the Marshals take over Kilkenny. So there's not at one point where the Irish are, under development. This whole idea of these naked Celtic people is a Tudor invention that keeps popping up over and over and over again. And people keep asking me, why are the Irish these naked Celtic undeveloped people that live in, boggy ring forts and stuff? And I'm like, well, the evidence doesn't indicate that at all.
Like I said, it was never about regardless, it was never about the lack of capability to make it. It was just a lack of need to make these things. That just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean these people couldn't do it. They just didn't need it for whatever how their societal structure worked. And that's an example for a lot of peoples around the world. That when we use these markers to define civilized people, and it's ridiculous. But as we say, we're coming in. We've got 4 minutes left, so it's probably best we start doing the thank yous and the rounding ups.
Right, we'll start finishing up there. Lads, tomorrow over on my Patreon at Irish Medieval History, if you just want to support my channel for a stop, definitely head on over there. On saying that, for about 20 quid a month, I always do a presentation on a Sunday night. So if you want to head over to my Patreon and listen to my presentation or listen to recordings, I've actually got it all recorded. All previous recordings as well is on my Patreon. Tomorrow, I am covering the topic of the Bruce in Ireland. And God, there's so many debates and topics. I was surprised how many was in there. But I'll be covering them all. Obviously, I might put in my interpretation of it, but I will mostly be focusing on the various debates that arise from the likes of Dr. Sean Duffy and various academics from Scotland when talking about the Scottish War of Independence in Ireland, particularly the Bruce invasion of Ireland. So if you're interested in that presentation, definitely head on over to my Patreon. It's about 20 quid a month, and it's definitely well worth it when you get a recording every Sunday night. So definitely go and check that out. Micheál, any plans for this week? Are you up to anything?
Let me just quickly say, Gallagher is not a Norse name, though, even though what it means. Come join next live I have. All right, so this will be leading into what Philip's asking. I will put a post up either on Facebook and YouTube when I will do my normal surname lives, because we didn't get our YouTube live last Wednesday. So keep an eye on either the group if you follow on the Facebook group or my Facebook page, but and YouTube. And we'll go through surnames and stuff like that and histories and etc. What else am I doing? No, I've been too bogged down writing my book, which I'm not going to go too much detail because it's a way off yet. So yeah, I'm just sort of plodding along. I'll hopefully maybe get some. There's a family thing going on at the minute. There's a member of the family that's not very well, so I don't know if I'll be posting too much in this week. But you never know. I might have a spare hour or something. But just
Sure.
like the channel, just like the videos, comment in the videos. That'll do me grand. Thank you.
For sure. I would definitely agree on caveman there. The Irish definitely believe that they had civilized the Norwegians, that's for sure, and introduced God to them. Anyway, regardless, Dr. Owen O'Neill, any plans for the week? Your shorts are doing great. I was looking at your shorts. If you haven't checked out Dr. Owen O'Neill's shorts over on his channel, as you can see there, written there, definitely head on over to his channel and check out his shorts, because his shorts are really, really good right now. Do you have any plans? Are you doing more shorts? Because I'd love to see more shorts off yourself.
I did one this afternoon on Foilhammer and Bay in Valencia and the cable, because I've been helping out on the UNESCO process. So
Oh, wow.
I've been doing a lot of work on that. I will have the second part of my Battle of Kinsale coming out towards the end of next week. I don't know whether it's going to be 3 or 4 parts, because there's a lot written and I'm trying to do it. And then actually after that, I'll probably do a video on the Valencia cable, a long video, because I've been learning and I've been working all year on that. And then I'm doing shorts as I can, because my daughter does loads of sports, so I often go for a walk when I bring her somewhere, and I'll video something just to make it short.
I wish I was that practical. Like, I should be. Caveman, that's interesting. Well, like anything, let us know, and we'll be happily to share on this channel, on these lives. We'll, all your work, I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Keep it up, and maybe I'll poke your head for some notes on mine. Mine's about 60,000 words, or I can't remember what the timer said. It was 60,000 words or something at the minute. It's 9 chapters. It's a head melt. Actually, I was saying to Owen earlier, the biggest problem I had was I'd written it with old notes that I'd taken over the years. So I didn't know where the sources were. I knew they were good sources because I wouldn't have saved the notes. They weren't good sources. But so I'm having most of my works going back to try and find these sources. But yeah, thanks very much, guys. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
See you when I see you. Slán go, yeah. Bye now. Bye.